Be prepared for something new. Everyone is different. So are you. Stay straight. No masquerades. Do things that you'll remember. You can push too far, but stay fair. Stay on track. Give it your all. Get to the bottom of things. Decide what's right. Don't believe in what the others do. Find it out for yourself. Be close to it all. Bring your heart along. Follow your goals. Reach for the stars. Turn the weekend into the loudest party of your life. Are you prepared?
Well, hi everyone, and welcome to sunny Zandvoort on the coast of the Netherlands for qualifying for race 11 in DTM. And what a point we've got to in the championship, and point being the operative word, as there's just 1 point at the top between Matthias Ekstrom and René Rast. As we look at another Audi driver, Jamie Green, who was fastest in free practice 2 earlier on today. There, the BMW we saw briefly for Marco Wittmann, the current champion, as Jamie Green makes his way into the car. Jamie Green is currently P4 in the championship on some 87 points. Mike Rockenfeller then in the number 99 car. So Mike Rockenfeller here then, having taken a P2 in race 1 at Moscow. There's Augusto Farfus, the BMW driver. He's had a torrid time of it this year, in my opinion. Augusto Farfus, his best finish, a P7 in the street circuit at Norris Ring. Of course, that race 2 at Norris Ring, which will be remembered for the crash involving Mike Rockenfeller and Gary Paffett, the number 6 car of Robert Wickens. And former head of Audi Motorsport, Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich, is here, keeping an eye on things. Loic Duval alongside the Mike Rockenfeller car there was very, very impressive in free practice 2. With his best showing, P2, as we look at Gary Paffett momentarily before we cross back to Timo Glock, who thus far has had a couple of P2 places but hasn't taken a win in the championship so far this year. Could Zandvoort be the place that he does so? Jamie Green then, as I mentioned, was P1 in FP2. Great showing from Loic Duval. Then it was Rast, Wittmann, Ekstrom, Paffett, Rockenfeller, De Resta, Auer and Timo Glock rounded out the top 10. So Jamie Green really had got the measure of the 4.3 kilometer circuit that's carved out of the dunes here in Zandvoort. 4 left-handers, 9 right-handers on this circuit. And there you can see the focus and the concentration on the face of Lucas Auer, who of course was at 1 point top of the points chart. He finds himself P3 now on 99 points, 14 behind the leader Matthias Ekstrom. And there, the number 31 car of the British star, the RBM driver for BMW, that is Tom Blomqvist, whose best placing so far in the season has been a P6. Now that street circuit in Norris Ring, and Bruno Spengler is champing at the bit to get out there on track. Bruno Spengler, who of course celebrated BMW victory at the Norris Ring. And there is René Rast, who is P2 in the points. Currently just 1 point behind his Audi teammate, that being Matthias Ekstrom. So Lucas Auer there focused, and Matthias Ekstrom also focused. René Rast was P3 in free practice, and there is Bruno Spengler just waiting for the light to go green, as it does now, and Bruno Spengler going to be first out on track. This is qualifying then which will set the grid for race number 1. Alongside me is motorsport journalist Lee O'Gorman as we look at Paul di Resta, who, of course, Paul di Resta was back in a Formula 1 car at the Hungaroring and actually did a very, very creditable job.
Did a very, very good job, actually, to step in at such short notice, bearing in mind he only found out an hour or so before qualifying.
And he said at the end of the race, the thing that troubled him most was the fact that his boots didn't fit him properly and his feet were killing him when he got out of the car.
He's going to have a bit more of a physical day here today around this old circuit at Zandvoort as we see the cars come out. Dave, you mentioned something actually as we go into this qualifying session. Matthias Ekstrom will be ahead of René Rast in the championship standings. Ekstrom, of course, hasn't actually won a race yet so far this season. What he's done, he's made an awful lot of very credible,
consistent point scoring, consistent
podium finishes. And, you know, good qualifying helps that.
Of course it does.
Occasionally, we've had a couple of races this year where Rast hasn't had the best qualifying, and maybe it's left him further down the grid than he would normally like. Same with Auer, who's had some good qualifying and then some that didn't really come together. And there have weekends where they're winning races and then maybe not scoring anywhere near what they would wish, whereas Ekstrom is just banking points.
What's hurt Lucas Auer more than anything else is 2 DNFs.
Yeah.
You know, because other than those 2 DNFs, with the exception of one race, he's always been in the points. But he finds himself P3 now. We find ourselves on board with Bruno Spengler. René Rast, to go back to René Rast, what a season he's having. Bear in mind, he's a rookie. All right, you know, he had been out in the car previously, but actually this is his rookie season, and to find himself P2 in the championship, that's a remarkable achievement from, it has to be said, an extremely talented racing driver.
Absolutely. You know, René's been around for a while. He's been there. He's done that. He's won lots of championships and big races in the past. So he's not, you know, he's not a young guy who's just come into the series. But you know what? It's very difficult to just come into DTM, jump into a car, and do such a job that he's actually done this year. 2 race wins so far, and I'm sure he's going to have more coming in as Tom Blomqvist comes in from his outlap. Change onto new tyres and goes back out again.
So Tom Blomqvist then in the number 31 BMW. Now, qualifying is short, sharp, just how we love it. It's full of showbiz, isn't it? You can see the clock at the top left-hand side of your screen already. We only have just over 17 minutes, and this is a brilliant shot from the Maro Engel car, who, of course, Maro Engel is a DTM race winner and a thoroughly, thoroughly nice guy as well. There, the rev counter on the right-hand side. And you can see as he makes his way around this winding old-school circuit, 228, now 230 kilometers per hour before he lifts off this downhill sweeping section. He tries to hug the inside. The car naturally tries to take you to the outside. Maro Engel we're on board with now. He's going to give us the first benchmark time. The Mercedes-Benz driver, of course, it's his second stint in DTM. Maro Engel then taking his victory at the Moscow Raceway. First victory in DTM, and he was one very, very happy man about that. Very, very well deserved. Sector 1 of 48.8, that just gives us a benchmark. Already someone has gone better than that. As you can see, it now goes from pink to green, which means that the overall best becomes a personal best. Of course, it's the personal best because it's the first time that we're seeing Maro Engel on a timed lap here in this qualifying session, with which there is only just under 16 minutes left. He rounds the final turn and heads for the timing line, and this will give us our first time with which to judge all by, and it's a 1:38.027. Here comes René Rast then, as you can see, warming the tyres, just weaving from side to side, also warming the brakes, which is also critical as well, because you need the brakes up to temperature as much as you need the tyres up to temperature, Lee.
There are some couple of very critical stops on this circuit, Dave, just as the one we saw there coming through the chicane, where you need to just, you're going very, very fast on that backhand section, so that just to get right on the brakes, but still carry a decent amount of speed through the chicane. And you know, coming into turn 1 as well, where you've got a long straight here, you don't jam on the brakes in turn 1. You just bite them ever so slightly. But the brakes need to be the absolute right temperature to not take off too much speed, but also not lock up.
Yeah. And it's a very thin line between, you know, braking sufficiently and not locking up. Right, let's go back on a hot lap with Maro Engel then as we wind our way through this Zandvoort circuit. Sector 1 is best of anyone of 39.122. 23.114 through Sector 2. Maro Engel then for Mercedes-Benz then. Heads now towards the sweeping final sequence of turns here at Zandvoort. It's turns 12 and 13 then. And we'll head towards the timing line now. Maro Engel then could go P1 in the early stages of this qualifying. Indeed he does. A 1:28.656. Here is Jamie Green looking very, very quick. But he's got traffic because he's got Bruno Spengler ahead of him now. Whilst this may not hamper him, I suspect it will because he did an overall best through Sector 1 and now it's only a PB in Sector 2.
And I think he's hampered a little bit more than that. He's actually gone off slightly on the entry into Ari Lyondike current turn there, but he's still put in P2.
Enough for P2.
And it's worth noticing, Dave, as well as Rennie Rast as a personal best in
This could be a new P1 time. Rennie Rast then across the timing line. Yes, a 1:28.287. Forgive me interrupting you.
There's the one thing to understand about these qualifying sessions is 20 minutes long. That gives everyone an opportunity for 2 long runs. So what we're seeing now is the initial run for qualifying. They're setting their banker laps, get in their first quick times. Then we're all going to see them come in. They'll change, they'll put in fresh tyres, chat to the engineers briefly, and they'll be sent back out again to try and go faster once again.
The problem with that strategy is when you go out for the second run, everyone is doing the same, and that's when traffic is at its most dense on track. Gary Paffett goes P2 with a 1:28.375.
And this is where the communication between the team and the driver is absolutely pivotal, because the team are the ones, they're the ones who are going to need to plan to make sure you are actually sent out into clear air, not sent into a pack full of cars where you will just lose time.
But sometimes that choice is not available to them, is it? Tom Blomqvist now, PB through Sector 1. Best of anyone through Sector 2 for BMW then. Tom Blomqvist rounds the final turn then and heads for the timing line. 1:28.287 is the current fastest time from Rennie Rast. And Tom Blomqvist pushes Gary Paffett to P3 because it's a 1:28.351. 6/100ths slower than Rennie Rast at 1:28.287. Marco Wittmann, who found himself at P4 at the conclusion of FP2 earlier on today. Again, he's done a PB through Sector 1. He is quicker than everyone through Sector 2. Let's keep an eye on where Marco Wittmann can put this car. And he goes P1 with a 1:28.065. Who is going to break out of the 1:28? Who is going to be the first one to go into the 1:27s here? Could it be Maxime Martin? Maxime Martin then for BMW crosses the timing line. Well, no, he goes P2, a 1:28.155. Here comes Augusto Farfus now. He's looking quick. And Augusto Farfus is the first one to give us a sub-1:28 time, 1:27.907.
And Glock betters that again in the BMW. As the laps tick down, as this qualifying session ages, there's more and more rubber being laid down on the track, and bearing in mind we're only a half hour after the Formula 3 race that we're also on Hankook tyres, so there's more and more rubber gets laid down, there's more grip on offer to these cars.
What we should also mention, as you're talking about grip, Lee, is it's a newly resurfaced Zandvoort, isn't it?
Absolutely, and you've got the chemicals that are still very much in just under the surface of the road. They're still coming up, as you see some very dark clouds.
Yeah, I just noticed that.
And that's actually something that's going to be on the minds of a lot of drivers this weekend as well. We had although we only had sessions starting this morning, this track was actually washed clean last night. Some very, very, very heavy rain. As we see the drivers come in back into the pits now, they'll have their discussions with their engineers, change tyres and then be sent out again. But the track was washed clean last night, so they've actually come in this morning, had the first couple of practice sessions, a very, very, very green track. And you know what, this could be interesting. We'll actually have to look at this rain. Is it going to come in the next few minutes, Dave, do you think, or is that still too far away?
No, I think it's still too far away. We've got 10.5 minutes remaining on this qualifying session as Rennie Rast then, his car is put back into the garage. The Rennie Rast car run by Audi Sport Team Rosberg. We're on board with Timo Glock, who currently Timo Glock with that 1:27.823.
I think one of the interesting interesting notes in that standings. It's got Wittmann there in P3. Reigning champion, two-time DTM champion, of course, from 2014 was his first title, and he won last year as well. But he's only actually had the best result of P3 so far this year. He's taken 2/3. So the season hasn't really come together for him, and he really wants a big result this weekend.
Yeah, he's languishing P7 in the points, which is not what we expect from Marco Wittmann necessarily. Augusto Farfus is currently P2, so good showing thus far from Augusto Farfus. We are couldn't quite make that out from.
So it looks like it's 4/10 in sector 1.
Yeah,
it's Auer probably asking where he's actually losing time over the lap.
Has to be said, I spoke to Lucas Auer yesterday, and he's not been feeling brilliantly, to be fair. Yeah, you can see you're pointing out on the timing screen the difference in sector 1.
Yeah, Auer is a second down on the fastest time by Glock so far. So he's 4/10 down.
Not at the moment, I'm still waiting for the data. I will call you out when we get data. So at the moment the biggest issue seems to be sector 1, 4/10 compared to Paffett. And sector 2, 1.5/10. Sector 3, 1.5/10.
Okay, but then try something with the rear wing.
You can see that all being processed by Lucas.
So we need to try, maybe it's outlet or tire pressure or rear wing, but we need to try something.
Okay, what Auer is talking about there, he's losing 1.5/10 in the middle sector to his teammates.
Okay, sorry.
There's no need to
There's
apologize.
a high risk of rain, so we should go out earlier.
Now,
Lee, perhaps you were right.
what they're also looking at as well, it's Auer's losing 4/10 in sector 1, he's losing 4/10 in sector 2, and he's losing 2.5/10 in sector 3.
Okay, Lucas, we will go out now because we go out now.
So the worry is,
The rain is
Could
coming.
already start to rain.
So the worry is they're actually losing time everywhere as opposed to just dropping it into a single corner.
Lee, with 7.5 minutes left and rain coming down, this is going to change the whole. This is going to change this final part of qualifying, because green track, as you were saying, newly resurfaced track, the back end just snaps away from the Lucas Auer car.
I think it's already too late, Dave. I think they've left it too late. I think they've left it too late.
What we can see on the left-hand side of the screen might be the grid, because, and this is exactly what I was saying,
Okay.
but for a different reason.
Back to box. Back to box.
Yeah.
When you leave it until,
Gentle to the tires.
you know, you've got to put the banker lap in, because, you know, here we get in a situation.
I have a little nugget for you. They're expecting rain today. They're expecting rain later this afternoon for race 1. Do you bring the car back in the garage, send them back out in wet tyres to get them wet running? Because they've had no wet running so far this weekend.
No, that's true, as we see Gerhard Berger, who, of course, is head of the ITR.
I think if I'm a team boss, or a team engineer, I actually really seriously think about sending them out in wet tyres to get them wet running.
Copy, just to stop tires, come back in.
Maybe. Well, let's see. What we can tell you,
How much minutes do we have left?
6 minutes left, 6 minutes.
And with 6 minutes left, what we can tell you,
No way, come back in.
That's very heavy rain.
pretty sure, is that the order you're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen is going to be the race order, because no one...
Rain here, start finish.
That's
so
very, very, very heavy rain.
We are P1.
Well, Timo Glock then, in his qualifying session with a 1:27.823. That time is not going to be bettered by anyone, certainly not now.
Come back in. Rain is slightly less on the back, but it's game over.
Game over.
At least be on P1. That's good.
Yeah, as we said, for RMG it's 1, 2, 3. So let's see.
Look at this. It's going to be BMW first 2 rows, then Audis, then BMW, before the best of the Mercedes is going to be Gary Paffett.
And that's why, this actually come back to a point I was mentioned earlier on, that's why our engineer is comparing the 1.5/10 loss in the second sector to Paffett, because Paffett is actually the leading Mercedes.
Yes.
Stefan needs to pay a bit of some bills tonight.
3 key words now, Dave.
Yeah, let's see what we can get.
3 key words. Don't bin it.
Timo, it's not my fault actually. The engineers have to pay.
Repeat again, repeat.
Well, pick it up on various bits of team radio conversation then as the cars are nursing their way around this now very wet track. Mike Rockenfeller is out of the car and shaking his head. It's a P9 for Mike Rockenfeller. No one at the moment, Lee, seems to have taken your advice and gone out there and got some wet running in
Just
on
for your
wet
info,
weather tyres.
I was now, every time when I was on the skates and when I came back and I just wanted to go out, every time when I wanted to select first gear, I could not select first gear. It's every time like false neutral and I need to release clutch and then press the clutch again. So there's very strange, and it happened like already 3 times now.
That's interesting. Is that a clutch issue then?
Clutch or gear selection issue there in selecting gear 1 for Timo Glock. Well, whatever the gear selection issues, he has set the fastest time, a 1:27.823. This is very bad news for Mercedes-Benz, whose best car is P8 with Gary Paffett, and then it's P11 with Paul di Resta.
And this is the importance of setting a good banker lap in that first set of runs as well.
Absolutely, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And I have to be honest, you predicted that rain. I didn't agree. I thought it was too far away. But then all of a sudden, the heavens opened, didn't they? I mean, it's eased off a bit now, but, you know, the track is completely and totally compromised with the 3 minutes that are left. So the team, of course, have access to the weather radar, don't they?
It reminds me of an old cartoon by Jim Bamber in Autosport years ago when Gerhard Berger was team principal at Toro Rosso. You know, all the other teams, the Italian Grand Prix in 2008, they had all the monitors seeing where the weather was, and Gerhard Berger sticking his hand out to the air to feel the rain come in. And sometimes you just have to kind of go at what you can actually feel if they may have seen the weather thinking it would come in a little bit later on, but it just...
What it does do is it provides a very, very interesting grid when we compare that with the championship. René Rast, P2, he's the best of them, going from P5. Look where Ekstrom is, P10. Look where Auer is, P16.
And I go back to what I was saying earlier on. If I'm Auer, I'm probably a little bit more concerned about they were losing time everywhere, as opposed to just dropping the odd, having a big gap in 1 or 2 specific corners. They're dropping chunks of tenths almost kind of across the circuit. That's going to be a worrying thing for Mercedes. They're going to work hard on that in the gap between qualifying and the race.
Well, as if we needed any more drama in DTM, which always throws up some surprises. We've had the first of those surprises thrown up in qualifying, with the weather changing with about a third of the session left. And that means that those that went out and put a banker lap in are the ones that find themselves at the sharp end of the grid now. And that has played into the favour of the BMW cars with Glock and Augusto Farfus by far and away. Could give him the opportunity for the best result of his season so far, as he'll be going from P2.
And notable as well, as the engineer said to Glock over the radio, it's actually Team RMG. P1, 2 and 3 in that, so it's actually the one team who bagged the, as you can see, the heavy rain and some poor unfortunate desperately trying to get there.
Loic Duval, of course, it's going to prove to be a very, very good qualifying for Loic Duval, because he'll be going from P6. He was very quick in FP.
This is actually what I'm talking about, Dave, as Duval is back out. Is he just giving a bit of a run on the wet tyres just to get a feel of the grid?
Maybe.
And that, if it is wet later on, and there's touch and go as to exactly when the rain will fall, this can actually be very clever. Duval has joined
Rockenfeller and Ekstrom.
And Nico Muller as well. This can actually be a pretty clever strategy. Why is it only the Audi guys doing it?
Well, that's a question that we may well put to Dieter Gas when we see him later on. So Matthias Ekstrom we're on board with now.
So even if it's not the exact same level of rain later on, at least it's a taster for the drivers. You know what the grip is like, and it's damp. Okay, the track is damp, it's probably beyond greasy, it's just damp. But at least it gives the drivers some knowledge of what the feel is like going into the race later on, should conditions be similar. So I'm actually very surprised more drivers didn't go out and at least test it for a couple of laps.
Well, the order is completed because the qualifying session is over. So the order you see on the left-hand side of the screen is the order with which the cars will be starting as the rain begins to really come down very heavily once again. It will be Glock on pole position, Farfus P2, Wittmann P3, Martin P4. Then it will be René Rast and Loic Duval, Tom Blomqvist, Gary Paffett, Mike Rockefeller, Matthias Ekstrom, Paul di Resta, Robert Wickens, Maro Engel, Nico Muller, Jamie Green, who was so quick in FP2, Lucas Auer, Bruno Spengler, Eduardo Mortara. It'll be a very different grid to perhaps that we expected if we took our measure from what we saw in FP2 earlier on today.
And yeah, just got a shot a few moments ago of this second burst of very heavy rain has left an incredibly deep spray coming down the start-finish straight as well. So we see the checkered flag out. Time set, the grid set, and it makes for a very interesting race, a very good race. If you're a BMW, they'll be very happy, and I'm sure Jens Marquardt is going to be smiling.
Well, you know, a point was made earlier by our director that, you know, the teams have access to very sophisticated weather predictions, and, you know, you have to say no one really saw it coming, did they?
No, that came up very quickly, and I think that's sometimes you just have to kind of stick your hand out and kind of look at the clouds.
Use more, yes, workman-like methods. Here is the qualifying then for race 11, Timo Glock, P1. Then it was Augusto Farfus, Marco Wittmann, Maxime Martin, René Rast, Loic Duval, Tom Blomqvist, Gary Paffett, Mike Rockefeller, Matthias Ekstrom, P10. Then we see Paul di Resta, Robert Wickens, Maro Engel, Nico Muller, Jamie Green, Lucas Auer, Bruno Spengler, and Eduardo Mortara. So, weather conditions changing qualifying significantly. Marco Wittmann then for BMW goes from P3 on the grid. A brilliant qualifying, as it turns out, for Augusto Farfus. He's going from P2. And then the man that took advantage of setting in a very quick banker lap, Timo Glock, finds himself pole position for race number 1 to come up a little later today. Weather conditions here at Zandvoort then, extremely changeable, and they've changed the face of that qualifying session as we see the Loic Duval car is pushed back into the garage right now. Here comes the grid in full for race 11. Front row then will go the way of Timo Glock and Augusto Farfus for BMW. The same is said of row 2. It's an all BMW lineup with Marco Wittmann and Maxime Martin. Before we see the best of the Audis, which is René Rast with Loic Duval, his best qualifying to date, P5, P6. Tom Blomqvist and Gary Paffett, P7 and P8. P8 is the best that Mercedes could do. Mike Rockefeller and Matthias Ekstrom are on the 5th row of the grid. And then to the 6th row of the grid, we find Paul di Resta and Robert Wickens, 2 Mercedes there together, P11 and P12. Then it's Maro Engel and Nico Muller on the 7th row, P13 and P14. Jamie Green and Lucas Auer share the 8th row of the grid, and on the 9th row it's Bruno Spengler and Eduardo Mortara. So that is the way it looks then, as the Jamie Green car is pushed back into the garage, and the rain just eases a little, but you can see just how damp the pit lane is. That really rather heavy shower came down and took really rather everybody by surprise during that qualifying session, as Matthias Ekstrom makes his way down the pit lane now. And there is Nico Muller in conversation as well. Of course, it was announced earlier this week that Nico Muller will be out in a rallycross car with the Ekstrom team. And all the Audi drivers there walking down the pit lane towards their respective garages. So qualifying done and dusted. And there is Matthias Ekstrom, who from P10 on the grid has got some work to do this afternoon. And what will the weather conditions be? Only time is going to tell, of course, but we haven't got long to wait before the first DTM race of this weekend is out on track.
And interestingly enough, Dave, you mentioned the changeable weather conditions. It has actually stopped raining.
Yeah.
So we got 2.5 hours or so until race 1. It'll be interesting. I don't think it's actually warm enough here to really to drive the track quickly. We're going to have one qualifying session for GT4 in between. That's only about 20 minutes or half an hour. So that's probably going to take some of the rain away, but it's quite cool out there. So
whilst it is cool, and I agree with that, of course, what it also always is here at Zandvoort is windy.
Oh, yeah.
And the wind can take some of that away, so absolutely only time will tell.
Blomqvist on screen there, he's got P7 and that was,
look at the spray coming off the back of Jamie Green's car as that really did come down.
And I think some of the Mercedes drivers are almost to a degree going to be hoping for a bit of rain because they're quite low down in the grid, and that's why I was a little bit surprised that they didn't go out for laps in wet weather if it is damp later on, because that's where they could actually make quite a lot of headway.
So we'll join us. Make sure you join us for what is going to be a very spectacular race. Bye-bye from qualifying.